There are rumors and then there are movements. Right now, Days Gone 2 does not feel like a rumor. It feels like a comeback story waiting to happen. I mean, for years, the sequel to Days Gone has lived in this storage limbo, not officially alive, not completely dead. A game that launched to mixed critical reception but built one of the most loyal, vocal fan bases PlayStation has seen in the last decade. And lately, the whispers aren't fading, they're sort of getting louder because something is shifting. When Days Gone released in 2019, developed by Ben Studio, it wasn't positioned as a guaranteed franchise starter. It was gritty, slow burn, messy in places, but beneath the technical hiccups and uneven reviews was something players connected with deeply, which was the atmosphere. The Pacific Northwest wilderness, the lonely highways, the tension of riding into a horde you weren't prepared for, and Deacon St. John, flawed, broken, but human. Over time, something rare happens. The game aged well. Patches improved performance, word of mouth spread, sales quietly grow, and what started as a solid but flawed title evolved into a cult favorite. Players, didn't just want more, they felt like the story wasn't finished, and that's where things get a little interesting. Publicly, a sequel was reportedly pitched and rejected years ago. Narrative became the accepted truth that Days Gone 2 wasn't happening. Ben Studio moved on, the franchise was shelved. But that also then, fast forward to now, and the landscape looks very different. Sony has aggressively building its first-party portfolio. Franchises that once seemed one and done are getting second chances, remakes are getting greenlit, dormant IP is being revisited, and Ben Studio has been suspiciously quiet about what they're working on. The silence? It's basically fuel. In fact, insiders haven't confirmed Days Gone 2, but they haven't denied movement either. And in an era where projects can pivot mid-development, cancellations, doesn't always mean permadeath. Especially when a game proves it has long-term commercial legs. Now, let's zoom out for a second. Why would Sony even consider Days Gone now? Because the market has changed. Open-world survival experiences are bigger than ever. Zombie fatigue never truly killed the genre. If anything, the right execution still sells. Just look at the cultural dominance of post-apocalyptic storytelling across media. But Days Gone wasn't just about zombies, you see, it was about scale. The freakier hordes weren't scripted events, they were just systemic nightmares. Dozens, sometimes hundreds of enemies moving as a single fluid organism. When you saw a horde crest over a hill, it didn't just feel like a boss fight, it just felt like nature itself turning hostile. And that mechanic alone still stands out. Now imagine that system rebuilt for modern hardware. Faster streaming, denser AI, larger dynamic hordes that roam freely across a seamless map. Imagine storms affecting freakier behavior, night cycles changing migration patterns, entire settlements forced to relocate because of shifting infestations. That's not just a sequel, that's basically evolution. Narratively, Days Gone left threads hanging, The ending didn't just close Deacon's arc, it expanded the world. The revelation about the infected hinted that the outbreak wasn't as simple as mindless decay, intelligence, mutation, adaptation. That twist felt like a setup, and it never actually got payoff, which makes the sequel rumors feel less likely wishful thinking and more like unfinished business. Deacon's journey in the first game was deeply personal, loss, loyalty, redemption. But Days Gone 2 wouldn't need to repeat that formula. It could expand beyond survival and into something more ambitious, rebuilding. Another question is, what does society look like years after the apocalypse? What happens when freakers evolve? What happens when human factions become more dangerous than the infected themselves? And here's where speculation gets, we think, exciting. Ben Studio has had years to refine their engine, tools, and open world systems. If they've been quietly prototyping a new IP, that tech could easily pivot back into the Days Gone framework. Studios rarely throw away solid foundation. Let's be honest, Sony loves franchises with identity, and Days Gone did have a lot of. For example, God of War has mythological combat, Horizon has robotic wildlife, The Last of Us' emotional narrative weight. Days Gone has the bike. That motorcycle wasn't just transportation, it was survival, it was customization, it was tension management. Running out of fuel in hostile territory wasn't a gimmick, it was anxiety. A sequel could double down on that mechanic, expanded bike customization, co-op envoy mechanics, territory control tied to road networks, maybe even dynamic horde ambushes while you're mid-ride. Look, imagine riding at dusk, fog rolling in, your engine echoing through the forest, and in the distance, movement. Not scripted, not cinematic, just systemic chaos reacting to your presence. That's the magic Days Gone tapped into. But we also have to address the elephant in the room, of course. Sony reportedly passed on a sequel pitch before. Why reverse that decision? Because numbers matter. Days Gone crossed significant sales milestones long after launch. It found its audience on PC, it trended on social media reportedly as fans demanded a sequel. Sometimes publishers underestimate long-tail success, and sometimes they reconsider. Bench Studio itself has gone through changes, a lot of them. Leadership shifts, high-win expansions. When a studio scales up quietly, it usually means something substantial is in development. And here is even another angle. PlayStation's lineup and the late PlayStation 5 era will need variety. Not every exclusive can be mythological fantasy or cinematic narrative drama. A grounded American wilderness survival epic fills a different niche. Days Gone 2 wouldn't compete with The Last of Us, it would contrast it. One is intimate and linear, the other one is systemic and open-ended. And if Sony wants ecosystem diversity, reviving Days Gone makes strategic sense. Let's talk tone. The original game had enough edges, of course, dialogues that didn't always land, pacing issues in the first act, but it also had heart, a lot of it. Deacon wasn't polished, he was messy, emotional, sometimes frustrating, but believable. A sequel could refine that writing, tighten the pacing, deliver a stronger centric conflict, expand side characters beyond cam quest givers into fully realized survivors. And imagine if Ben leaned harder into that choice. What if camp could permanently fall? What if alliances mattered long term? What if hordes weren't just threats but tools you could manipulate against enemy factions? That kind of systemic depth would elevate Days Gone to beyond open world zombie sequel territory. And just imagine the reveal trailer one day. Rain pouring over cracked highways, Deacon's older, quieter, and you kind of infected stalking through the tree line, a radio transition cutting through the static. They're changing. Cut to black, title card, Days Gone 2. If Sony drops that at the right moment, that reaction would be explosive. The reaction would be explosive. Because this isn't about proving critics wrong. It's about proving that cult classics can evolve. And if Bench Studio has quietly built in this sequel with lessons learned from the first game, stronger writing, smoother pacing, deeper systems, Days Gone could be the redemption arc the franchise deserves. Not louder, smarter, more confident. The world's ready for another ride. And if the rumors are true, which there's a lot of right now, we might not be waiting much longer to hear that engine start again.